Hello, this is the Neuroscience Sensory Pathway Project Group 12. Darila, Ashleigh, and Heidi all participated in this project. The first somatosensory system that we're going to look at is the dorsal column medial lemniscus pathway, also called the DCML. This somatosensory pathway carries localizable touch and proprioception. The DCML pathway starts in the lower body. In the foot, there are mechanoreceptors, and if someone steps on a rock, they are going to feel pressure, which will create stimulation of the receptors. The mechanoreceptors in the skin will send signals to the first-order neuron. The first-order neuron is a unipolar neuron with one extension coming from the cell body, and here we have a zoomed-in image of the first-order neuron. The signal will go through the dendrites to the cell bodies that are going outside of the spinal cord, known as the dorsal root ganglion, and from there, the axons are going to come into the spinal cord and extend into this region between the two dorsal horns, called the dorsal columns. Inside the medial portion of the dorsal column, the signal will be sent to the fasciculus gracilis. Only the sensory signals from the lower body will be sent to the fasciculus gracilis because the fasciculus gracilis only receives sensory signals from the lower body. We included the fasciculus cuneatus in the picture because it is part of the DCML pathway, but the fasciculus cuneatus is only in the upper body portions of the DCML sensory pathway. From the fasciculus gracilis portion of the dorsal column, the signal will extend all the way up until it gets to the medulla and synapse onto the nucleus gracilis of the medulla onto the second-order neuron. The axon from the second-order neuron will decussate or cross over to the opposite side, and it will extend to the thalamus and then synapse onto the third-order neuron of the VPL, also known as the ventral posterior lateral of the thalamus. From there, the signal is going to extend through the axon portions of the neuron into the internal capsule to the corona radiata, and then that signal will synapse onto the primary sensory portion of the brain that receives signals from the foot. The next somatosensory pathway that we're going to look at is the spinocerebellar pathway. This carries unconscious proprioception and has an anterior and posterior tract. The receptors in the joints will be sent to the first-order neuron. The first-order neuron is unipolar, so the signal will be sent through the dendrites to the nerve endings in the periphery. That signal will then travel through the cell body through the dorsal root ganglion. Then the signal will extend through the axon and enter the spinal cord. This will cause the first-order neuron to synapse onto the dorsal horn of the second-order neuron. If the second-order neuron has an anterior axon, it will either extend ipsilaterally or cross over and then cross back in the medulla and then extend to the same side it started and then synapse in the cerebellum. If the axon is posterior in the system, then it will extend ipsilaterally to the cerebellum, and then the second-order neuron will synapse ipsilaterally onto the cerebellum. No matter if the axon was posterior or anterior, as seen in the picture, if the signal came in from the left side, it will eventually synapse ipsilaterally onto the left side of the cerebellum. As you can see in the image, the signal goes through the first-order neuron and then synapses to the dorsal horn of the second-order neuron. And in this picture, we have a contralateral view of the signal going through the system. Thank you for watching this presentation, and this is our works cited.